Venice, Italy, is probably considered by many as the most romantic city in Europe, but it is under threat. More about that later. We can't think of anywhere else where you can sail down what is really the main street. Now this was a real bonus when, because of a medical condition, we were unable to disembark from our ship. Venice's population is about 270,000, and the city area covers 118 small islands, over 400 bridges and 115 canals. It is the canals and the bridges and the overlooking buildings which attract the tourists. The buildings are constructed on closely spaced wooden piles, most of which are still intact after centuries of submersion. The foundations rest on the piles, and buildings of brick or stone sit above these footings. Submerged by water, in oxygen-poor conditions, the wood, mainly alder, does not decay as rapidly as it would on the surface. What insane official allowed this vandalism so close to St. Marco? But there are several big threats to the future of this city. Firstly, during the last century, many artesian wells were sunk in the periphery of the lagoon as local industry drew water, and Venice started to subside. However, here is the good news. After artesian wells were banned in the city in the 1960s, the sinking slowed markedly, and it is now claimed that the city is no longer sinking. Secondly, the city is threatened by floods that follow certain tides. Engineering work is currently underway to fit hollow pontoons to the seabed across the entrances to the lagoons, which can then be filled with air when high tide threatens, so that they float to the surface and block the water coming in from the Adriatic. Thirdly, the city's sewer system, which is really very old, and basically means that its canals are its sewers. This obviously gives rise to health and sanitation issues. If a Venice hotel entrance gets flooded, it is necessary, after the flood recedes, to mop up at least twice with disinfectant. Despite all this, the tourists arrive in their millions, and this has given rise to a new and large threat to the city. On 22nd of September 2013, by a scheduling quirk, 12 cruise ships sailed past St. Mark's Square in one day, well above the average of just 2. About 50 protesters in wetsuits leapt into the canal to delay the procession of ships by an hour. This was an attempt to stop cruise ships coming into the lagoon. Not surprisingly, the ship's operators have responded, claiming that the ships create very little damage and cause no pollution. However, the politicians are now ready to put a halt to ships entering the lagoon, and are proposing switching the berths to a mainland port. In November 2013, the mayor was able to announce that finally the trend towards gigantic ships in the lagoon had been turned around. "We've had enough of these mega cruise ships just meters away from San Marco," he said. As from November 2014, vessels of more than 96,000 tons will be banned, and from January 2014, the number of cruise ships exceeding 40,000 tons will be reduced by a fifth. Local defenders of the ships say that 5,000 families are supported by the jobs guaranteed by the traffic, but the protesters counter this by suggesting that on the day when 12 ships arrived, 35,000 tourists arrived to disembark, buy a souvenir and then leave. Certainly, as we watched from the deck and saw the masses of tourists, we decided that, after all, we were not too sorry that we were unable to join them as they filled the streets and gondolas.